The chamber was massive, built to house representatives from 100 different worlds. Crystal pillars stretched toward a dome ceiling that showed the stars beyond. Commander Daniel Harper stood at the center platform, his dress uniform perfectly pressed, his hands clasped behind his back. Around him, in circular tiers that rose toward the ceiling, sat the delegates of the Galactic Council. He had been standing there for 3 hours. 3 hours of debate about humanity's petition for a permanent council seat. 3 hours of listening to species after species discuss whether humans deserve to sit among them as equals. Daniel kept his face neutral, but inside, his heart was heavy. For 30 years, humanity had served the council faithfully. When the Trelvan plague broke out, human doctors had rushed to help. When pirates attacked the outer reaches, human ships had defended those worlds. When species needed mediators for their disputes, human diplomats had worked endless hours to find peaceful solutions. Earth had shared its medical research, its agricultural techniques, its engineering innovations. They had asked for so little in return, just respect. Just a voice at the table. The Zothian delegate, Ambassador Velkar, rose from his seat. His scales glittered under the chamber lights, and his voice carried across the room with natural authority. "The humans have indeed provided valuable services," he said, his tone making the word services sound dismissive. "But a permanent seat requires more than usefulness. It requires strength. It requires proven leadership. Humans are excellent at following orders and completing tasks. Let them continue in that capacity." Several delegates made sounds of agreement. The insectoid Kree clicked their mandibles in their version of applause. The crystalline Solventi remained silent, but their vote display showed red. Negative. Daniel watched the voting board as it updated. Red marks appeared one after another. Species that humanity had helped, that human soldiers had died defending, voted against them. The final count appeared on the main display. 247 against, 38 in favor, 15 abstentions. The gavel came down. "The petition is denied," announced the council speaker. "Humanity will retain its current status as an associate member." Next item on the agenda. Daniel stood there for a moment longer. No one was looking at him anymore. They had already moved on, discussing trade regulations like nothing important had just happened. He gathered his data pad from the podium and walked toward the exit. His footsteps echoed in the vast chamber, but no one turned to watch him leave. In the corridor outside, his assistant, Lieutenant Karen Lewis, was waiting. She had watched the proceedings from the observation gallery. Her face said everything. "Sir, I'm sorry." "It's all right, Karen," Daniel said quietly. He pulled up his wrist communicator and typed a short message. Just 2 words and a code. "Protocol Exodus." Karen's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything," Daniel replied. He pressed send. The message went out on encrypted channels to every human facility, every ship, every outpost across council space. "We're done here. Tell everyone to pack up. We're going home." The message reached Earth within minutes. At Terran Defense Command headquarters in Colorado, Admiral Catherine Price was reviewing deployment schedules when her screen flashed red. Priority message. She opened it and read Daniel's brief note. Behind it was his official report, but she didn't need to read it. She had expected this outcome. Catherine was 62 years old. She had spent 40 years in the service, 20 of them dealing with council politics. She had watched her people bend over backward to help species that barely acknowledged their existence. She had attended funerals for soldiers who died defending alien worlds, funerals that council representatives didn't bother attending. She had seen the casual disrespect, the way council members treated human achievements as expected rather than appreciated. She called an emergency meeting of Earth's military leadership. Within an hour, 10 admirals and generals sat around the conference table. Catherine didn't waste time with speeches. "The council rejected our petition. Commander Harper has initiated Protocol Exodus. I'm asking for confirmation. Do we proceed?" The vote was unanimous. They proceeded. Orders went out immediately. Every human military unit in council space received withdrawal orders. Every diplomatic mission was recalled. Every research team, every medical mission, every engineering project, all of it was to shut down within 2 weeks. No explanations were to be given beyond the minimum required by law. Personnel were to pack their belongings, secure any proprietary human technology, and return to Earth or its colonies. The withdrawal was quiet, almost invisible at first. On the mining colony of Durash 7, Karen Lewis began shutting down the systems she had maintained for 3 years. The Xathian overseers barely noticed. They assumed she was performing routine maintenance. When she loaded her equipment onto the transport shuttle and departed, they figured someone else would replace her. They didn't realize she had been the only one keeping their outdated systems functional. On the medical station above Trelva, Dr. Marcus Webb finished his shift in the quarantine ward. The viral plague had killed 8 million people before he and his team had brought it under control. They were close to a complete cure, maybe 6 months away. His research assistant, a Trelvan named Jirma, noticed him packing his personal items. "Dr. Webb, are you going somewhere?" Marcus looked at her kind, worried face. Jirma had worked beside him for 18 months. She had held patients while they died. She had worked through exhaustion to help save her people. "I've been recalled to Earth," he said simply. "When will you return?" Marcus didn't answer directly. "You have all my notes. The treatment protocols are in the system. You can continue the work, but we need your expertise. The virus is still mutating. I'm sorry, Jirma. I have my orders." He picked up his bag and walked toward the shuttle bay. Behind him, he heard her calling his name, but he didn't turn around. If he looked back, he might not be able to leave. And he had to leave. They all did. Across council space, the same scene repeated itself. Human engineers left their posts. Human soldiers boarded transports. Human diplomats closed embassies. Some of their alien colleagues noticed and asked questions. The humans gave vague answers about policy changes and restructuring. They were polite but firm. They were leaving, and they weren't saying when they would return. The Galactic Council didn't notice at first. They were busy with their usual business, the endless debates and political maneuvering that filled their days. It took 3 weeks before someone realized that every single human representative had left Kepler Prime Station. The Earth Embassy was empty, its lights dark, its doors sealed. Senior Arbiter Kren, one of the oldest members of the Council, walked through the abandoned embassy. His species lived for centuries, and he had seen many things in his 300 years. He had watched species rise and fall. He had seen wars begin over stupid reasons and end with pointless casualties. He had also watched humanity arrive on the galactic stage 30 years ago, eager and hopeful, wanting to be part of something bigger than themselves. He picked up a framed photograph from a desk. It showed a human family smiling at the camera. He wondered who they were. Someone's children? Someone's spouse? The person who worked at this desk had a life, had people they loved, and they had left it all to serve the Council far from home. And the Council had voted to keep them in their place. Kren set the photograph down carefully and left the empty embassy. He had a bad feeling about this. A very bad feeling. In the council chamber, Ambassador Velkar was arguing about trade regulations when an aide whispered in his ear. His expression changed. "What do you mean, all of them?" "Every human in council space has withdrawn, Ambassador. Military units, diplomatic staff, civilian contractors, everyone. They're all gone." Velkar dismissed the concern with a wave of his hand. "They're throwing a tantrum. They'll be back when they realize they need our markets more than we need them." But as weeks turned into months, the humans didn't come back. More troubling, they didn't respond to messages. The Council sent official communications to Earth's government. They received automated replies thanking them for their message and stating that humanity was pursuing internal development priorities. It was like talking to a machine. Ambassador Velkar tried a more direct approach. He sent a personal message to Commander Daniel Harper, whom he had debated with many times over the years. "Daniel, let us discuss this situation reasonably. Surely we can find a compromise." The reply came 3 days later. It wasn't from Daniel. It was from the Diplomatic Corps. "Commander Harper is no longer assigned to council affairs. Please direct all inquiries to the appropriate department." Then the standard message about internal development priorities. It was maddening. The humans weren't angry. They weren't threatening. They weren't demanding anything. They had simply turned away, as if the entire Galactic Council had ceased to matter to them, and somehow that silence was more disturbing than any angry protest would have been. On Earth, in a quiet office in Geneva, Director Lisa Grant read through the latest batch of messages from Council species, requests for meetings. 3 months had passed since the last human left Council space. At first, nobody really noticed. There were millions of species in the galaxy, Billions of workers, countless engineers and doctors and soldiers. How much difference could one species make? The answer came slowly, like a building developing cracks in its foundation. On Darash 7, the mining operation was failing. Supervisor Kelthar stared at his display screens in confusion. Production had dropped 60% in the last month. The automated drilling systems kept shutting down. The ore processors were running at half capacity. The transport systems had failed twice, causing massive backups. What is happening? He demanded of his engineering team. These systems have run perfectly for years. His chief engineer, a young Zathine named Mortok, looked frustrated. Sir, I have reviewed all the maintenance logs. The systems should be working, but there are errors in the code that I cannot find. The integration between modules is failing in ways that make no sense. Then fix it, Kelthar snapped. I am trying, sir. But whoever designed this integration used methods I do not understand. The documentation is incomplete. Kelthar pulled up the personnel files, searching for the previous engineering team. He found one name that appeared over and over in the maintenance logs. Karen Lewis, human. He tried to contact her, but her communication address was no longer valid. He sent a message to the Earth Embassy. It bounced back as undeliverable. The mine continued to fail. Within 6 months, the entire operation would have to shut down. The hegemony would lose billions in revenue, and nobody could figure out why, because the one person who understood the systems was gone, and she had taken her knowledge with her. Similar problems appeared across Zathine space. Power plants ran less efficiently. Climate control systems developed glitches. Communication networks had mysterious failures. It turned out that humans had been quietly fixing things for years, patching problems that the Zathine engineers either didn't notice or didn't know how to solve. Without those quiet fixes, everything slowly degraded. The Kree Collective faced different problems. Their territory in the outer reaches had always been vulnerable to pirates. The Council's Mutual Defense Pact was supposed to protect them, but the multi-species defense fleet was in chaos. Admiral Zekthor tried to organize a response to a pirate raid on Kree, Colony World Theta. He sent deployment orders to the 17 ships in Sector 9. 3 ships responded immediately. 5 responded late. 9 didn't respond at all because they couldn't decode the orders correctly. The Kree military used one communication protocol. The Zathine used another. The Solventi used a third. For years, human liaison officers had translated between them, coordinating responses, making sure everyone understood the plan. Lieutenant Jake Morrison had been one of those officers, stationed on the flagship, working 18-hour days to keep the fleet functional. Now Jake was gone. The fleet couldn't coordinate. By the time ships arrived at the colony, the pirates had already left with their stolen goods and captives. Zekthor filed an angry complaint with the Council, demanding better protection. The Council promised to address the issue. They never did because they couldn't. The fleet was broken and nobody knew how to fix it. Pirate raids increased. Without human coordination, the defense fleet couldn't respond effectively. Kree colonies became easy targets. Insurance rates skyrocketed. Trade in the outer reaches dropped by 40%. The collective's economy started to shrink. The Solventi, a proud and ancient species, faced a crisis that struck at their very survival. Their birth rates had been declining for a century. A genetic disorder affected nearly 30% of their population, causing a range of health problems. Human xenobiologists had been working with Solventi scientists on a cure. Dr. Helen Carter had led the research team. She was brilliant, with an intuitive understanding of genetics that impressed even the Solventi, who considered themselves the galaxy's leading biologists. The project had been close to a breakthrough. Another year, maybe 2, and they would have had a working treatment. Then Helen left. She took her research with her, all the proprietary human data locked behind encryption that the Solventi couldn't break. They tried to continue the work without her, but they kept hitting dead ends. The techniques Helen had used were unique, combining human medical knowledge with Solventi biology in ways that nobody else had thought to try. The Solventi Council of Elders met to discuss the situation. Elder Sovram, who had personally worked with Helen, spoke with unusual emotion. We were arrogant. We thought human science was primitive. We did not realize they were solving problems we could not even see. Now our children will suffer for our pride. The Council sent a formal request to Earth, asking for Dr. Carter's research data. The reply was polite but final. The research was proprietary human intellectual property, developed at human expense. It was not available for transfer. If the solventi wished to license the technology, they could submit a formal application, which would be reviewed according to standard procedures. No timeline was provided. No promise was made. Elder Sovereign read the response and felt something close to despair. They had voted against humanity's petition. He had personally voted against it, believing that humans were useful assistants but not equals. Now those assistants were gone and the solventi were paying the price. On Treleva, the situation was worse. The viral plague that Dr. Marcus Webb had been fighting came back with a vengeance. A new mutation appeared, and without his expertise, the local doctors couldn't adapt the treatment quickly enough. The death toll started climbing again. Jirma worked until she collapsed. She followed Marcus's protocols as best she could, but she didn't have his deep understanding of human antiviral theory. She didn't know how to modify the treatments for new strains. She sent desperate messages to Earth to Marcus personally, begging for help. The messages went unanswered. One night, exhausted and covered in disinfectant, she sat in the empty office that Marcus had once used. His coffee cup was still on the desk. He had left in such a hurry. She remembered the last thing he had said to her. "You have all my notes. You can continue the work." But she couldn't. The notes made sense on a technical level, but they didn't explain his thinking, his intuition, the way he could look at a virus and somehow know what it would do next. That knowledge had walked away, and thousands were dying because of it. The Galactic Council finally convened an emergency session. The chamber was tense. Species after species stood to complain about the problems they were facing. The Zethene talked about economic losses. The Kree demanded better security. The Solventi spoke about medical research failures. The Trelvans begged for humanitarian aid. Ambassador Velkar tried to maintain order, but the situation was deteriorating. "These problems are temporary," he insisted. "We are a resilient community. We will adapt." "Adapt to what?" Senior Arbiter Kren asked quietly. "We are not facing a natural disaster. We are facing the consequences of our own decisions. The humans will return," Velkar said confidently. "They need our markets. They need our protection. They cannot survive alone, can't they?" Kren pulled up a display. "I have been monitoring human space. They have not stopped developing. In fact, their economy is growing faster than before. They are building new colonies. Their research programs are advancing. They are forming trade partnerships with independent species that never joined the Council. They are not collapsing. They are thriving." The chamber fell silent. Nobody wanted to hear it, but the data was clear. Humanity wasn't suffering. They weren't desperate. They were doing fine without the Council. "Then we offer them better terms," suggested one delegate. "Trade concessions. Technology exchanges. Surely there is something they want." "They wanted respect," Kren said softly. "They wanted to be treated as equals. We told them no. Now they have decided they do not need our approval." Velkar drafted a message to Earth. It was carefully worded, offering renewed partnership opportunities and mutually beneficial arrangements. He avoided any language that might sound like an apology, because the hegemony did not apologize. The response came 3 days later. It was clearly automated, the same message Earth sent to everyone. "Thank you for your message. Humanity is not interested in external partnerships at this time." Velkar tried again, this time offering specific trade concessions. The response was identical, word for word. It was like shouting into empty space. Other council members tried their own approaches. The Kree sent a military delegation to Earth's solar system, hoping to negotiate directly. They were met at the edge of the system by a human warship, the TSS Defender. Captain Ryan Foster's message was polite but absolutely clear. "This system is closed to non-essential traffic. State your business or depart within 6 hours." The Kree delegation explained that they wanted to discuss security contracts, to hire human forces for protection. Captain Foster's response was devastating in its simplicity. "The Terran Defense Force does not accept external contracts. Our strategic priorities have been revised. Protecting council space is no longer among them." "You have 5 hours and 40 minutes to depart," the Kree tried to argue. They offered massive payment. They offered. 6 months had become a year. The problems that started as small cracks had become massive fractures, splitting the Galactic Council apart from within. The Galactic Trade Network, once a marvel of interspecies cooperation, was collapsing. For decades, human merchant fleets had moved goods between species who refused to deal with each other directly. Old rivalries and ancient grudges meant that many council members wouldn't let each other's ships into their territory. But human ships? They were neutral. They were trusted. They moved goods from Zathene space to Kree space, from Solventi worlds to Trelvan colonies, keeping the economy flowing. Now those ships were gone. Trade routes fractured along political lines. The Zathene refused to do business with the Kree. The Solventi wouldn't trade with the Trelvans. Species that had cooperated because humans made it easy now found themselves isolated. Prices for basic goods skyrocketed. Shortages spread across council space. The economic pain touched every world, every station, every settlement. On the hegemony homeworld, Ambassador Velkar faced a very uncomfortable meeting with the High Command. The room was cold, and so were the eyes of the military leaders judging him. "Explain to us," said High Commander Velsera, her voice like ice, "how our economy has shrunk by 30% in 1 year. Explain why our mining operations are failing. Explain why our exports have collapsed." Velkar chose his words carefully. "The withdrawal of human technical support has created unexpected complications. We are working to replace their expertise." "Replace them? You told us they were glorified servants. You told us they were easily replaceable. Were you wrong, Ambassador?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Velkar felt his scales tighten. "I underestimated the extent of their integration into our systems. It was an error in judgment. An expensive error," Velsara said coldly. "Fix it, get them back. I don't care how." Velkar drafted a new message to Earth. This time he swallowed his pride and offered real concessions. Lower tariffs on human goods. Preferential treatment for human merchants. Access to restricted technologies. He made the offer generous enough that any reasonable species would at least consider it. The response arrived 3 days later. "Thank you for your message. Humanity is not interested in external partnerships at this time." Word for word, the same automated response. Velkar stared at his screen in disbelief. They hadn't even read his offer. Or if they had, they didn't care. He tried to imagine what kind of offer Earth would accept, but he couldn't. It was like they had simply erased the entire Galactic Council from their concerns. The Kree Collective faced catastrophic losses. Pirate raids had become so common that some colonies were being evacuated. The multi-species defense fleet couldn't protect them, because the fleet couldn't coordinate basic operations. Ships from different species couldn't communicate effectively, couldn't share tactical data, couldn't operate as a unified force. Fleet Admiral Zekthor stood on his bridge watching another distress call come in. A Kree transport was under attack in Sector 12. He had ships in that area, but by the time he sent orders to all of them in formats they could understand, verified they received the orders and coordinated their response, the pirates would be long gone. He thought about Lieutenant Jake Morrison, the quiet human officer who used to handle all this. Jake would have had ships moving in 2 minutes. He knew every ship's capabilities, every captain's personality, every species' communication style. He made it look easy. Zekthor had never appreciated just how difficult that job was until Jake left. The transport was destroyed. 47 Kree civilians died. Zekthor filed another report. It joined dozens of others, all saying the same thing: "We need help." The council discussed the problem in committees. Nothing changed. The Solventi situation grew worse. The genetic disorder was spreading to a new generation. Without the research program that Dr. Helen Carter had led, they had no solution. Elder Sovrim made a personal journey to Earth's solar system, hoping that a face-to-face meeting might change minds. He was stopped at the heliopause by the same warship that had turned away the Kree delegation. Captain Ryan Foster was becoming famous across council space as the man who guarded Earth's door. "Captain Foster," Sovrim transmitted, "I come seeking humanitarian assistance for my people. Children are suffering. We need access to research that human scientists developed." Ryan's response was respectful but firm. "Elder Sovrim, I understand your situation, but the decision is not mine to make. Earth's government has been clear. We're not engaging with council species at this time. You're welcome to submit a formal request through proper channels. I have submitted requests. They are ignored." "They're not ignored," Ryan said. "They're denied. There's a difference. I'm sorry about your people's suffering, But Earth didn't create your genetic disorder. We were helping you fix it for free, asking nothing in return. Then your council voted to keep us in our place. Actions have consequences. Sovrim felt something break inside him. Ryan was right. They had voted to keep humans as junior members, useful but not equal. Now that usefulness was gone, and there was nothing the Solventi could offer that would bring it back. He turned his ship around and made the long journey home to tell his people there was no hope. On Earth, in his laboratory at Cambridge Research Institute, Dr. Marcus Webb sat staring at his computer screen. The cure for the Trelvan plague was complete. He had finished it 3 months ago. The treatment would save millions of lives. But it sat in his computer, unable to reach the people who needed it. He had tried everything. He had submitted requests through official channels. Denied. He had gone directly to Admiral Catherine Price. Denied. He had even tried to resign from government service so he could send the research independently. His resignation was refused, and he was informed that the research was classified as proprietary human medical data. Sharing it without authorization would be treason. Marcus understood the reasoning. He really did. If Earth helped Trelva, then the Zathin would ask for help with their engineering problems. The Kree would want military support. The Solventi would demand access to all human medical research. The precedent would destroy the entire point of the withdrawal. But understanding didn't make it easier. His colleague, Dr. Beth Sullivan, found him one evening still sitting at his desk at midnight. "Marcus, you need to go home. People are dying, Beth. Every day that passes, more people die from something I can cure." "I know," she said softly. "But you can't save everyone. If we break now, if we give in, then everything we've sacrificed means nothing. The Council has to learn that they can't take us for granted. That has to matter more than one planet." "Does it?" Marcus asked quietly. "Does our pride matter more than millions of lives?" Beth didn't have an answer. She left him sitting there in the dark, staring at a cure he couldn't use. The Galactic Council met in emergency session again. The chamber was half empty. Several species had withdrawn from the Council entirely, deciding they were better off on their own. The remaining members argued constantly, blaming each other for the crisis. A young Kree delegate stood and spoke with unusual anger. "We pretend this is complicated, but it's simple. We treated humans badly. They left. Now we're suffering. We created this problem. Ambassador Velkar tried to maintain order. We offered them generous terms for their return. They refused. What more can we do? We can give them what they originally asked for," Senior Arbiter Kren said. He spoke rarely now, watching the Council destroy itself with something like sadness. "A permanent seat. Equal representation. Respect. You want us to reward them for abandoning us?" Velkar demanded. "They didn't abandon us. We rejected them. There's a difference." Kren stood slowly, his ancient body moving with difficulty. "I've lived 300 years. I've seen many things. But I've never seen a species as gracious in rejection as the humans. They could have attacked us. They could have sabotaged the systems they built. They could have shared our secrets with our enemies. They did none of those things. They simply left. They walked away quietly and closed the door behind them. And somehow we're acting like they're the problem." The chamber fell silent. Nobody wanted to acknowledge the truth, but it hung in the air anyway. They had made a mistake. A terrible, expensive mistake. And they didn't know how to fix it. Velkar tried one more approach. He sent a message offering everything he could think of. A permanent council seat for humanity, full voting rights, technology sharing agreements, open trade, formal recognition of human contributions. He laid it all out. A complete reversal of the vote from a year ago. The response came from Director Lisa Grant personally. Velkar read it 3 times, each reading making him feel worse. "Ambassador Velkar, thank you for your offer. A year ago, this would have meant everything to us. We would have celebrated. We would have felt validated. But that was a year ago. Since then, we've learned something important. We don't need your validation. We don't need a seat at your table. We've built our own table, and we're quite comfortable there. Your offer is declined. Please don't send another." The finality of it was crushing. They had offered humans everything they originally wanted, and Earth had turned it down. Not with anger, not with... 2 years had passed since Commander Daniel Harper walked out of the Council chamber. 2 years of silence from Earth. 2 years of watching everything fall apart. The Galactic Council was no longer the grand alliance it once claimed to be. It was barely functional, held together by inertia and the fear of what would happen if it dissolved completely. Wars that human diplomats would have mediated in days had dragged on for months. Two member species were in open conflict over trade routes, their ships exchanging fire while the Council held endless debates about responses. The Kree Collective had split into 3 separate factions. Without external security, each faction blamed the others for their vulnerability to pirates. The split turned violent. Kree fought Kree in civil wars that nobody could stop because the peacekeeping forces had depended entirely on human coordination. The species that had clicked their mandibles in agreement when humans were rejected was now tearing itself apart. The Zathian hegemony faced internal rebellion. Their economy had collapsed to half its previous size. Colonies that had been profitable now operated at losses. The mining operations never recovered after Karen Lewis left. The engineering problems cascaded into infrastructure failures. Power grids became unreliable. Transport systems failed. People were angry, and they blamed their leadership. Ambassador Velkar had been recalled to the homeworld. He now stood before a tribunal explaining his failures. We could not have predicted the extent of our dependence, he argued. The humans were integrated into our systems at levels we didn't understand. You told us they were servants, said one judge. You told us they were easily replaced. You were either lying or incompetent. Which was it? Velkar had no good answer. He was removed from his position and assigned to a minor administrative role on a frontier colony. His political career was over, but at least he still had his life, which was more than could be said for some of his colleagues who had faced similar tribunals. The Solventi faced extinction. Their birth rates had dropped below replacement levels. The genetic disorder spread unchecked. Dr. Helen Carter's research remained locked behind human encryption, and without it, Solventi scientists couldn't find a cure. Elder Sovram spent his final years watching his species slowly die, knowing that salvation existed but was forever out of reach. He wrote a final testimony before his death to be preserved in their historical archives. We were offered partnership with a generous species, and we chose pride instead. Let our fate be a warning to others. On Trelva, the death toll from the plague had reached 20 million. Keeper Jirma walked through the memorial garden where names of the dead were carved into stone walls that stretched for kilometers. 20 million names. 20 million people who might have lived if Dr. Marcus Webb had been allowed to help. She had tried everything. Messages to Earth, appeals to other species. She had even attempted to recreate Webb's research from his notes, but without his expertise, she got nowhere. The cure existed. It was real. And it sat on Earth unused while her people died. Jirma created something she called the Archive of Remembrance. It was a massive building dedicated to documenting everything humans had done for Council species. She collected records of every human aid mission, every infrastructure project, every medical program, every diplomatic success. Room after room filled with the quiet evidence of human contributions that nobody had bothered to notice while it was happening. The archive became a pilgrimage site. People came from across Council space to walk through the halls and see what they had lost. They read about human doctors who had died treating alien diseases. They saw records of human engineers who had worked themselves to exhaustion, fixing problems that nobody thanked them for. They watched videos of human diplomats mediating disputes at 3 a.m, because that was when compromise became possible. One room displayed a wall of photographs. Human faces smiling, working, helping. Each photo had a caption explaining what that person had done. There was Karen Lewis, standing beside the mining equipment she had kept running for 3 years. There was Jake Morrison, coordinating with alien officers who couldn't stand each other. There was Helen Carter working late in her lab, chasing a cure for children who weren't even her own species. Velkar came to the archive 6 months after his demotion. He walked through it alone, spending hours in each room. He had known humans were involved in Council affairs. He had worked with them, but seeing the scope of their contributions, the sheer dedication they had shown, left him shaken to his core. These weren't servants following orders. These were people who had believed in something bigger than themselves, and the Council had crushed that belief without a second thought. In the room displaying diplomatic achievements, he found records of negotiations he had personally participated in. He remembered some of them as his victories. deals he had brokered through his skill and experience. But the records told a different story. Behind the scenes, human diplomats had worked for weeks building consensus, softening positions, finding creative compromises. They had made him look good, and he had never realized it. Velkar sat on a bench in that room for an hour, staring at the faces of humans he had dismissed as useful subordinates. He felt something he rarely experienced: shame. He requested permission to visit Earth. It was denied. He requested again 6 months later. Denied. He kept requesting every 6 months for 3 years. Each time denied. He was beginning to think he would die without ever making amends. Then, on his 7th attempt, something changed. The response came from Director Lisa Grant herself. "Your request is granted. You may visit Earth for 1 week as an observer. You will have no official meetings. You represent no one but yourself. A guide will be assigned to you." Velkar arrived on Earth on a cold morning in Geneva. He was met by a human in casual civilian clothes, not a diplomat or official. The man introduced himself as Sam Parker, a retired military officer who now worked as a civilian guide. "I'm here to show you Earth," Sam said simply. No speeches. No propaganda. Just reality. "You wanted to see us? Here we are." Sam took Velkar around Earth over the course of a week. They visited a hospital in London, where doctors worked on treatments that were no longer shared with other species. The research was cutting edge, years ahead of anything the Council had. "We're still helping people," Sam explained. "Just our own people now." They toured a shipyard in Singapore where massive vessels were under construction. Sleek warships and enormous colony ships. Designs that would have been shared with Council species 2 years ago. Now they were exclusively human. "We're expanding," Sam said. "Dozens of new colonies in the next decade. We're building our own future." They attended a university lecture on xenobiology at Oxford. The professor discussed Council species with academic detachment, the way one might discuss historical civilizations. There was no hostility in his tone, but no particular warmth either. The students asked intelligent questions about Cree social structures and solventi genetics, but it was all theoretical. These species were subjects of study, not partners. What struck Velkar most was a memorial park in Washington. It was quiet, peaceful with trees and walking paths. In the center stood a long wall inscribed with names. Thousands of names, a plaque explained. These were humans who had died while serving Council interests. Soldiers killed defending alien worlds, doctors who caught diseases while treating alien populations, engineers killed in industrial accidents while building alien infrastructure, diplomats assassinated while mediating alien conflicts. "Did the Council ever acknowledge them?" Velkar asked quietly. Sam's expression hardened. "Once. We received a form letter thanking humanity for its contributions to galactic security. That was it. No memorial. No moment of silence. No recognition of individual sacrifice. Just a form letter." Velkar stood before the memorial for 2 hours. He read name after name. Each one represented a life given in service to species who hadn't cared enough to remember them. The weight of it crushed something inside him. On his last day on Earth, Velkar made a request. "I want to record a message, to be broadcast to Council space. Will you permit this?" Sam checked with his superiors and received approval. They set up a camera in a simple room, no fancy background, nothing official. Just Velkar speaking from his heart. "My name is Velkar, formerly ambassador of the Zathine hegemony to the Galactic Council. I come before you to speak a truth that should have been spoken 2 years ago. We were wrong. Not in policy, not in politics. In something more fundamental. We were wrong about who humans are and what they meant to us." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I stood in the Council chamber and called them servants. I voted to keep them in their place. I believed they were useful tools, nothing more. I was a fool. They were never our servants. They were our partners, and we were too arrogant to see it. They gave us their best people. They shared their innovations. They defended our worlds. They asked only for respect, and we gave them contempt." The camera stayed on his face as he continued. "I have walked through the archive of remembrance on Trelva. I have seen the records of what humans did for us. I have visited Earth and seen what we lost. They are..." 5 years had passed since the vote that changed everything. 5 years since Commander Daniel Harper walked out of the Council chamber without looking back. 5 years of silence from Earth. The galaxy looked different now, The Galactic Council still existed, but it was smaller, humbler, more careful. The species that remained had learned hard lessons about cooperation. They worked together not because it was easy or comfortable, but because they had no choice. The humans who had once made everything run smoothly were gone, and their absence had taught the galaxy just how valuable they had been. Trade networks had slowly rebuilt, but they were fragile. Every species had to negotiate directly with every other species now. It took months to arrange deals that humans would have brokered in days. The economy functioned, but it limped along at perhaps 60% of what it had been before. Wars had ended, mostly through exhaustion. The Kree Civil War had burned itself out after 3 years, leaving all factions weakened and bitter. They had reunited not out of forgiveness but out of the practical reality that they were vulnerable alone. The other conflicts across Council space had followed similar patterns. Peace came not from wise diplomacy, but from everyone being too tired to keep fighting. Medical research continued, but at a fraction of the pace it once had. Without human xenobiologists bringing fresh perspectives and innovative techniques, progress was slow. The Solventi had managed to develop a partial treatment for their genetic disorder, but it took them 4 years to achieve what Dr. Helen Carter's team might have accomplished in 1. Their population was stable now, but smaller. A generation had been lost. On Trelva, the memorial garden had grown. 23 million names were now carved into those stone walls. The plague had eventually burned itself out, but not before claiming 3 million more lives than it might have if Dr. Marcus Webb had been allowed to help. Keeper Germa, now old and tired, still maintained the archive of remembrance. She gave tours to young Trelvans, making sure they understood what their world had lost. Why didn't the humans come back? A young student asked her one day. Germa smiled sadly. Because we taught them that we didn't value them. And when someone learns that lesson, it's very hard to unlearn it. The archive had become famous across Council space. Thousands of visitors came each year to walk through its halls and confront the evidence of their collective failure. It had spawned similar projects on other worlds. Museums dedicated to human contributions, memorials honoring human sacrifices, entire academic fields devoted to studying what had gone wrong and how to prevent such failures in the future. Velkar had returned to public life, but not as a politician. He spent his time traveling to schools and universities, speaking about his experiences. He talked about his arrogance, his blindness, his failure to see humans as equals. He showed the recordings from his week on Earth, the memorial wall, the names of people who had died in service to species who never thanked them. We thought we were superior, he would tell his audiences. We looked at humans and saw useful subordinates. We never saw the artists and scientists and dreamers. We never saw the children who wanted to explore the stars. We never saw people. We just saw function, and when they stopped functioning for us, we acted shocked as if we were entitled to their service. His speeches were uncomfortable to watch. He didn't soften the truth or excuse himself. Young Zethine would leave his lectures questioning everything their society had taught them about strength and hierarchy. Some elders said he was teaching dangerous ideas. Velkar didn't care. He was old now, his career was over, and the only thing he could still do was tell the truth. Earth remained silent. Messages sent to human space received the same polite, automated responses they had for 5 years. Trade was limited to a handful of independent species who had never joined the Council, carefully controlled relationships that benefited Earth's expanding colonial empire. Humans were building their own sphere of influence, and it had nothing to do with the Council. Captain Ryan Foster still commanded the TSS Defender at the edge of human space. He had turned away hundreds of delegations over the years. Some came with apologies, some came with offers, some came simply hoping to talk. His answer was always the same. Earth is not accepting diplomatic contact with Council species at this time. On Earth, the debate about re-engagement came up periodically in government circles. Some argued that 5 years of isolation was enough, that the Council had learned its lesson, that humanity should reconsider its position. Others insisted that nothing fundamental had changed, that the moment humans returned to Council space, they would gradually slip back into old patterns of being taken for granted. Admiral Catherine Price, now 70 years old and nearing retirement, was firmly in the second camp. They changed their structure, she said during a cabinet meeting. They created new rules. They put an empty chair in their chamber. But did they change their hearts? Did they fundamentally alter how they view us? Some of them have, argued her successor, Admiral Kevin Wright. We've seen the speeches. We've seen the memorials. There's real acknowledgement of what happened. From some individuals, yes. But what about the institutions? What about the power structures? The Council reformed itself out of necessity, not enlightenment. The moment we're back, the moment they have access to our capabilities again, human exceptionalism will become human exploitation. It always does. Director Lisa Grant, still leading the diplomatic corps, maintained her position. Humanity would re-engage when and if they chose to, on their terms, not because the Council finally decided they were worthy. We're not playing hard to get, she explained. We're not negotiating. We've simply moved on with our lives. If that changes someday, fine. But it changes because we want it to, not because we feel sorry for them. Dr. Marcus Webb had left government service. He now ran a private medical research foundation focused on diseases affecting human colonies. He never forgot about Trelva, but he had accepted that his moment to help them had passed. Sometimes he wondered if he had been right, if he should have sent the cure despite orders not to. But the question was academic now. The plague was over one way or another. His colleague Beth Sullivan had gone into medical ethics, teaching at Harvard. She used the Trelvan situation as a case study in her classes. Was humanity right to withhold aid? She would ask her students. 23 million people died from a disease we could have cured. Does any political principle justify that? The students would debate it for hours, never reaching consensus. Some argued that principles without consequences are meaningless, that humanity had to hold the line. Others insisted that morality requires helping those in need regardless of past injustices. Beth never told them which answer was correct. She didn't know herself. On Kepler Prime, senior arbiter Kren had died at the age of 320. His final words were reportedly a question. Have they forgiven us yet? The answer then as now was that Earth hadn't said either way. Forgiveness required engagement and humanity had chosen disengagement. His replacement, Arbiter Thonka, was younger and more pragmatic. She believed the Council had done enough to prove it had changed. She drafted a formal proposal. Send a single representative to Earth, not to negotiate, but simply to establish that communication was possible. Let there be one meeting, unofficial, with no agenda beyond confirming that dialogue could exist. The proposal passed the Council unanimously. They chose their representative carefully, not a politician, not a military officer. They chose Keeper Jirma, the Trelvan doctor who had worked beside humans and never forgotten them. Jirma was 70 years old now, tired and gray. She didn't want to go. She had spent decades working at the archive, honoring human memory, and she had made peace with the fact that humans were gone. But when the Council asked, she couldn't refuse. Maybe, she thought, she owed it to Marcus Webb to try. She sent a message to Earth, simple and direct. My name is Keeper Jirma. I worked beside Dr. Marcus Webb for 18 months. I am not representing the Council officially. I simply wish to speak with anyone who remembers him. I want to tell them about the lives he saved and the legacy he left. If this is not possible, I understand, but I'm asking as a friend, not as a government representative. For weeks there was no response. Then one day she received a message, not from the diplomatic corps, not from any official source, from Marcus Webb himself. Jirma, I remember you. I remember Trelva. I would be willing to meet with you privately, on the condition that this is not diplomatic contact. You come as a friend, not as a Council representative. If you agree, I'll arrange clearance. Jirma agreed immediately. 2 weeks later, she arrived on Earth. No escort, no diplomatic protocols. Marcus met her at a small cafe in London. Just two old doctors having coffee. They talked for hours. Jirma told him about the archive, about how his work was remembered, about the children who were alive because of what he started even if he couldn't finish it. Marcus listened quietly, his eyes distant. I wanted to help, he said finally. You have to know that. I fought to be allowed to send the cure. They wouldn't let me. I know, Jirma said. I always knew. I never blamed you, Marcus. I blamed the situation. I blamed history. I blamed all of us for creating a galaxy where doing the right thing,